Hi, I'm Dr. John Demartini, and at one time I lived on the streets, but today I get to travel the world, do exactly what I love to do, which is teach and inspire people all over the world. And I'm also blessed to be one of the passionate few. I just had an amazing opportunity to have a great interview by Omar. Wow, fantastic questions. He got to stuff that most people don't get to. And all I can say is that if you want to go do something amazing in your life, stay tuned and basically watch this show, because this show is definitely an inspiration not only for me as an interviewed person, but also the people that are going to be able to listen to this and do something amazing with their life.
Welcome to this episode of the Passionate Few podcast today. It's your host, Omar here, and today we have an incredibly inspiring interview that will blow you away as we get to sit down with none other than human behavioral specialist and expert, Dr. John Demartini, known as the author of over 40 books and a student and educator who's learned from over 260 different disciplines ranging from biology, sociology, economics, and more. Dr. Demartini shares with us how he did all this while building a multi-million-dollar business, inspiring millions of people around the world over the course of his nearly 40-year career, starting from humble beginnings. Dr. Demartini shares with us how he grew up in Texas, struggled with dyslexia and a learning disability, but ultimately run away from home in his teens and found a mentor that would change his life. So whether you want to learn about Dr. Demartini's story or you want to learn how to maximize your potential in your life or your business by finding, aligning, and living your values and creating a more fulfilling life by filling it with high priority actions that inspire you instead of low priority distractions that don't, I promise you, you'll want to enjoy this interview to the very end with my good friend, mentor, and the creator of the Breakthrough Experience program, which you can check out in the description below, the incredibly inspiring and intellectual one of two interview with Dr. John Demartini. Enjoy. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Dr. Demartini.
Thanks for having me.
Honored to have you here on the show today. Now, let's get right into it. Before we talk about your values and what you've come to be known for in helping literally people from all walks of life, from almost every country on the planet, talk to me a little about where you grew up and what your childhood was like, and sort of where did the trajectory begin before you headed to this direction where you're at today?
I was born in Houston, Texas, November 25th, 1954, on Thanksgiving Day. My mother told me that she had to eat a turkey sandwich that day instead of having a turkey feast. I was in Houston, Texas. I lived there till I was 12. I was challenged as a child with my arm and leg turned in, and also had speech problems, and had to wear braces from about a year and a half old to about 4, and also had to do special exercises with buttons and strings and stuff with my mouth when I was a child. The reason I mention those is because I suspect that had something to do with me later wanting to be able to speak and to be able to travel and be on the road, because I was constrained. When I was in first grade, I found out that I had difficulties learning and reading. And I was told by my first grade teacher that, in front of my parents, that I'm afraid your son will never be able to read, he'll never be able to write, he'll never be able to communicate, he'll never go very far in life, never amount to anything. And I had to wear a dunce cap, believe it or not. Me and Daryl Dalrymple, we had to face the window and have that because we wouldn't be able to read. I made it through elementary school with the smartest kids in the class by asking questions. And I'm kind of known today by my questions.
That's right.
I think that's part of the catalyst too. And I would ask the smartest kids, what did they get out of the class? And they would give me insights. And I made it through elementary school that way, as a strategy. Then my parents, when I was 12, moved to Richmond, Texas, which is outside Houston. And we went to a country area where there's a lot of lower socioeconomic positioning. And the school that we attempted to go to, which is 13 miles away from our home, we had to ride a bus there, did not have all those smart kids. It was kind of a less standard school.
Gotcha.
And I didn't have anybody to bounce questions off of. And then I ended up failing, and I dropped out of school. So I'm a young teenager now. And
How old were you when you dropped out?
I moved out of the house when I was 13.
Where did you move to?
So that's a funny story. I don't know if that would be appropriate for the thing, but
we'll take it.
You'll take the story?
Let's hear it.
Okay. I was playing pool with my dad in the barn where we were living, and we were playing pool. And I told him that I need to go in now because I need to get cleaned up because I've got an event, something to go on into town. I was going to hitchhike into town. And he said, well, you've been out every night this week. You need to stay home. And I said, well, but I've got something planned and I've already committed to it. Well, son, you need to stay home. And I said, well, I'm going in. And my dad didn't want me to go in, and so we had a little bit of a challenge there. I didn't want to tell him why I was going to town, but my best friend, his parents had left for the weekend, and there was a hot chick that I had the hots for, and he had a chick over, and we were going to have a special, educational period. And
Rendezvous.
a rendezvous. And so my dad said, well, if you go out tonight, you don't come back. He was trying to just be disciplined. It was not like any major thing, but.
Right.
And so I said, okay, because I was not going to pass that up.
Right.
And so I loaded up my little suitcase and left home. And my mom said, are you sure you want him to go? She was trying to talk him out of it. He said, no. If he's old enough to make his decisions and do that, he's going to be on his own. So I stayed at his place, and I stayed at a friend's house, and I stayed in a park, and I stayed in a bowling alley, and I stayed at a Texas grill restaurant that stayed open 24 hours a day. And I started to be kind of a street kid.
So you were literally homeless at this time?
Well, not because I had to be. I could easily have gone home, I'm sure.
Got you.
But I was on an adventure. And my dad had helped me when I was young to be more of an entrepreneur because he knew I had problems with learning.
Was he an entrepreneur?
He was. He had his own plumbing business. He was an engineer. When I was 9, I started my first business. I had 9 employees when I was 9.
What kind of business was
it? It was a landscaping business. And I went to my dad and I wanted to earn some money to buy a baseball and a glove. And he said, well, did you mow the yard? Yes. Did you sweep the sidewalk? Yes. Did you edge the sidewalk, the edges? Did you clip the hedges? Did you clean out the gutters? Did you sweep out the garage? Did you do my shoes and shine them? Did you pull the weeds? Yes, sir. I said, well, if you want to make money, I don't have anything else needs to be done, and I'm not going to give you money without doing something of service. You're going to have to go to the neighbors. So I went to the neighbors, and I started going neighbor to neighbor to find landscaping things I could do, because I was pretty good at landscaping.
Right.
Mowing, edging, and stuff. My dad taught me that. So I started doing that, and my dad saw me with a new baseball and a glove, and he said, where'd you get the glove and the baseball? I said, well, I bought it. Well, with what? Well, the money I earned. Well, how did you earn it? Well, I did the neighbors' yards. Well, what equipment did you use? And I said, well, in the garage. He said, well, son, I have to charge you for that. So he back charged me on that, and I owed him $7.50. And then I had to pay a certain percentage of whatever I was doing back to him to pay for the equipment, which diluted my income, like a taxation process, I guess.
Right.
And then I ended up getting other young boys in the neighborhood to help me and pay them a portion of it, and I would close the deals. And I ended up with 3 groups of 3 teams helping me do the landscaping. And I got 2 other neighbors' equipment, and they charged me the same as my dad. I guess they talked to my dad. And I had 9 employees going on when I was 9. And after I'd paid everybody off and the gasoline and everything else, and I collected about $45 net to me, which is pretty good in 1963.
Sure, especially at 9 years old.
Yeah, that'd be probably hundreds today. I don't know how much, but hundreds of dollars. And my dad saw me do this, but he saw that I was spending all the money. So he said, well, son, if you just keep spending it, you're going to have to work all your life. You need to do something that's more creative. And so he bought me a coin collection set and a piggy bank. And so I started taking the coins and sticking them in there. And he explained to me that if I leave them there, they'll be more valuable. And I put money in a piggy bank. And I filled that piggy bank up in 1963. And he never gave me the combination to open it or any lock to undo it. So in my drawer on the 52nd floor of Houston, Texas, Williams Tower, where one of my offices is the original piggy bank from 1963 with the original coins in it.
Wow.
It's never been able to be opened, and I've never opened it. And I've kept it as a reminder to think long term. Because my dad was trying to think, don't just work your life for money, have money start to work for you, and think in the form of savings. So my dad was really amazing at teaching me those things. And he had the belief that I would figure things out and I was capable. And so even though I was living on the streets, he didn't overly concern himself about it. He just figured, I've taught you things. You got to learn how to do it. You're not an academic. You're not going to make it in school. You got to learn how to be street smart, which I'm very grateful for. I think I became partly an entrepreneur because of those bringings. So I lived on the streets 13 and 14. At 14, I hitchhiked out to California and came right into LA and right over to Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
And I stayed in Huntington Beach. And then that summer I hitchhiked up and down the coast surfing because I was wanting to surf. And down into Mexico, I went all the way down to Mexico, to Acapulco, and throughout Mexico, hitchhiking.
Just surfing and hitchhiking.
Surfing and hitchhiking, and living kind of a vagabond guy, hippie.
What was your plan at that time for your life? Or you were just taking it one day at a time?
Well, I was surfing. This is the 60s, so it's the kind of the free love days, and you're on an adventure, and hitchhiking was not abnormal at the time. A lot of people did it.
Right.
And so I was on an adventure to travel the world hitchhiking and surfing. So I had my board, my little headband, and my surfboard and bag, and I did that. And I eventually panhandled enough money along the beaches and did little things. I worked in Jack's surf shop there and got enough money to fly to Hawaii. And so at 15, I left for there. And I lived first under the Kamehameha Highway bridge at Sunset Beach, then in the Elattar Beach Park bench. And then if it rained, I went in the park bathrooms. And then I found an abandoned car. And then eventually I kept social climbing. And I eventually lived in a grass house tent combination. And I did that till I was 17, almost 18. And then right about a month before my 18th birthday, I ended up with cyanide and strychnine poisoning from eating some of the plants that were not wise to eat.
Right.
And I nearly died, right before I turned 18. And luckily a lady found me in my tent and helped me recover and got some fluids in me, took me to a health food store. And leaving a health food store one day, I saw a special thing on the flyer on the door, special guest speaker Paul C. Bragg, the guy that's done Bragg's amino acids and nutrition things. And he was speaking there at the Sunset Recreation Hall one night. And I attended that. I never went to classes, but something intuitively said, go to that class.
So that was your first foray into any kind of personal development at all?
It was a special moment. So I remember walking up these little steps, going in there. There's 35 people or so sitting on a wooden floor, and there's this woman yogi and Paul Bragg sitting in a chair. And I walked in and sat down on this little kind of towel mat. And then he began speaking. And he spoke for 45 minutes, 50 minutes. And then he said that we have a body, we have a mind, and we have a soul. The body must be directed by the mind must be guided by the soul in order to maximize human potential, who you are. And that you need to set goals for yourself, your family, your community, your city, your state, your nation, your world, and beyond to 100, 120 years. And nobody ever talked to me like this. I was told I was stupid and never read and this kind of stuff. And this guy doesn't fudge on that. He's just saying, this is how you live an amazing life kind of thing. And after he did his presentation, which I felt he was talking to me the whole time, and I felt for the first time in my life that maybe, just maybe, I could end up becoming intelligent. And maybe I could overcome my learning problems. And maybe I could do more than just surfing. I mean, I was good at surfing, not super great, but I was in the next tier under the greats. I got to be in some surf movies and surf books and magazines and things. But that night I actually thought maybe I could overcome my learning problems. And I really did not want to be stupid. I wanted to be intelligent. I was intelligent with my body, but not academically. And then he took us through this guided imagery meditation experience. And in that meditation, I saw a vision of me standing in front of 1 million people speaking.
Wow.
And I had, just a matter of about 5 or 6 years ago, a gentleman named Andrew Tischler from Australia, Melbourne, Australia, who's a famous painter there, was in my talk when I mentioned that. And he came up to me and asked me if he could capture that and paint that.
Wow.
And he did an extraordinary job of capturing it. And it sits in my office today in Houston. It's this big painting of me speaking in front of 1 million people. And with every major icon building from every major city in the background, because it was me wanting to get to the world. And the vision I saw was that I was teaching from my heart about the power we have to not only heal, but to live kind of an extraordinary life. And it was so real. It was that when I came out of that vision, I looked around, everybody was in tears, everybody had their heart open. Paul Bragg was sitting at the front of the room with his eyes closed, with his hands on his knees. You could almost read his mind. Thank you for revealing to these young souls their destinies. That's what I felt like.
Wow.
It was a very sacred moment.
And how old were you at that time again?
I was 17, just about turning 18. And in fact, it was November 18th, a week before my birthday. And then he said, well, those of you who'd like to join me, every morning I have a class. And so I hitchhiked 5:45 in the morning to join him at Fort DeRussy each morning for the next 3 weeks and listen to him just talk. And what we do is he would do these exercises and we'd do that. Then he would have a lecture and then we'd have some fresh fruit. That was our ritual every day. And I learned a lot from that. I learned about the power of my mind, the power of the vision, the power of what I say to myself, how I feel about myself, about goals. And I was just on the very last day I ever saw him, I never saw him again. He said, I'm going back to Mount Shasta and the Santa Barbara area, and I hope to see you all someday, but I'll be leaving now. And my mentor, who was like my mentor for 3 weeks, is all of a sudden leaving. And there's a part of me that's like, well, what will I do now?
Right.
And so I had never had the courage to walk up to him, but at this moment I did. And I said to him, well, Mr. Bragg, you said at that time on the North Shore that whatever I decided that night will become my destiny. He said, that's right, young man. He says, well, sir, I don't know how I could do it because I saw that I wanted to be a teacher and travel the world and speak. And he said, well, that's right, young man. I said, well, I don't know how to read. I've never read a book in my life. And I don't know how to speak. I have speech problems. And he said, well, that's not a problem, son. Every single day, I want you to say this one thing to yourself and never miss a day. Say, I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom. And he made me say that over and over and over and over again until my eyes closed, until I felt it.
I'm a genius and I plan my wisdom.
I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom. I've never missed a day. I say it every single morning.
Until today?
To this day.
How long now? How many decades now?
It will be 47 years in November.
Wow, and you've never missed a single day?
I never missed a day.
Wow.
And it's inspiring for me to say that. I didn't know what a genius was until a bit later, but now I define a genius as one who listens to their inner voice and follows their inner vision and obeys it and lets the voice and the vision on the inside become louder than all opinions on the outside. So they live a heroic life from within and not a conformed life without kind of thing. And so I ended up doing that. He leaves. I go back to the tent. I start meditating. I started eating differently. I started doing what he taught me. I went and bought my first book in my life, Chico's Organic Gardening and Natural Living. And the reason I bought that book is because the guy on the cover looked like me, and I thought if that sucker could write it, I bet I could read it.
Yeah.
And it was just a bunch of gardens.
Right.
Not a lot of writing. But it was inspirational because it was the first book that ever went page by page by page, even though I didn't get every word, that at least I attempted to read a book. And that was amazing. And I still have that book today.
Wow.
And then I ended up flying back to Los Angeles, hitchhiking back to Houston. And when I got home, my parents taught me into taking a GED test, which is a high school equivalency, because I didn't have high school. And then I passed that by guessing. And what I did is I sat there and I said, I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom, and I just let my intuition fill in some dots because I couldn't read half the questions.
Right.
And I passed. And I'm starting to think, maybe this quote has some sort of magic. And then my parents said, why don't you take a college entrance exam in case you ever want to go to college? So I did that, and I did the same thing, but it was a 3-day test, and I passed. I'm actually now have a high school equivalence. So if I get a job, I can say I have a high school degree. And my parents said, why don't you try taking a college class, because there's no surf until October again. Surf's kind of down in North Shore. I said, all right. So I took my first class, English and history, and it was a 6-week class, so every 2 weeks I had a test. And 2 weeks in, I thought the same thing was going to happen. I thought I was just going to pass. But when I got the test scores the next day, I got a 27, and I needed a 72 to pass. When I got that 27, I was absolutely humiliated. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to talk to anybody, see anybody. I ran to my car. I slumped in the car because people were walking around. And then I drove home, and I was crying all the way home because I shattered the idea that I could be a teacher and be intelligent. Because I was building this dream.
Possibility, yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe it was just a fantasy, maybe it's a delusion. I really don't. And all I could hear is that teacher in my head. He'll never read, he'll never write, never communicate, never amount thing, never go very far in life. And I remember driving home and getting home, and I curled up on the floor under this Bible stand, which actually sits in my office today, because when my parents died, the one thing that I asked for my mom is to give me that stand, because it was a special moment. So I curled up in this fetal position under this stand, and I was just crying, and sitting there going, I guess I'm meant to go back to Hawaii and ride big waves again. This is an illusion. And I was really jolted by it. And my mom came home from shopping and she saw me there crying, and she hadn't seen me cry in years. And she said, son, what happened? What's wrong? I said, I blew the test. I guess I don't have what it takes. I guess I'll never read or write or communicate, never mind a thing, never go very far enough. And she didn't know what to say. She just paused for a moment. And then she said something that only a mother could say. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she said, son, whether you become a great teacher, healer, and philosopher and travel the world like you dream, or whether you go back to Hawaii and ride giant waves like you've done, or you return to the streets and panhandle as a bum like you've done, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you do, boy. And when she said that, my hand went into a fist, and I looked up, and I saw that vision that I saw that night with Paul Bragg in front of 1 million people. And I said to myself, with this fist, a determination, I'm going to master this thing called reading. I'm going to master this thing called studying and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching, healing, and philosophy. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across this planet. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of the earth stop me, not even myself. And it was a moment of no turning back.
Of decision.
It's done. There's divine providence, human sovereignty met. And I got up and I hugged my mom. I was very grateful for her. And I went into my room, I locked my door. I got a Funkin' Wagnall's dictionary, because if you bought $20 worth of groceries, you get a special encyclopedia volume or a dictionary. And I went in there and I made a commitment that I was going to read 30 words a day, memorize them, pronounce them, spell them, and my mom was going to test me on them every day. So my mom did. She was good at crossword puzzles, and she loved that. So she tested me on 30 words a day, and I made sure I couldn't go to bed at night until I had them spelled properly, pronounced properly, which was difficult with my speech, and used in a sentence that had meaning. And that grew my vocabulary. And I started reading dictionaries and encyclopedias to try to catch up with all the other kids. And I started to go back to school, and I started to excel. I was more determined to want to learn than most of the kids in school. They were taking it for granted.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn. And so with the help of my mom and my vocabulary and everything else, and reading dictionaries and encyclopedias, I just started growing my vocabulary and my ability to speak, and I practiced, spelling it, pronouncing it, everything. And I started excelling, and my first students came to me. I'm 18 years old, and I had a 375-pound woman come to me and wanted me to teach her yoga. Okay, that was interesting. Then a Persian man from Tehran asked me to teach him meditation.
So you started sort of attracting.
I started attracting because I would sit out in the sun and do meditation and do yoga out in the sun, and people were watching this, and there's not something in the small country town to see. It's not
normal. Man.
No, it wasn't normal. I was normal. And so they thought it was strange. They'd ask me about it, and they would gather around to watch and ask questions. And then I had about 16 or 17 students gather in the library one day and ask me to teach them and review them on a math class. And that was the first time I actually taught a class to people on math. And it was so inspiring, because one of the kids in that little class whispered to this other classmate, this other guy, because the whole class got out and they came in to study with me. He whispered to this other guy and he says, that dang Demartini, he's a freaking genius. And when he said that, I remember what Paul Bragg said. Paul Bragg said, if you say this affirmation, I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom, every single day, and never miss a day for the rest of your life, sooner or later the cells of your body will tingle with it, and so will the world. And when he said that, and that guy said, that guy's a freaking genius, I got tears in my eyes, and I just knew that I knew that I knew that I was going to pursue this, because if I figured if one little statement like that could change my life, I wonder what would happen if I filled a 24-hour day with affirmation statements. So I went home that night and I wrote out 24 hours worth of statements that I could say. I'm a master persistent, I do what it takes. I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom, right? No matter what I read, I retain everything, right? I have an autographic, photographic manner, whatever I read, I retain. You know, I do the right thing. I'm always at the right place, the right time to make the right context. I mean, I started just filling my day of how I wanted my life. Some were probably a little delusional at first until I refined them, but some were really dead center.
And the intention was to subconsciously command yourself to have to do these.
To fill an entire day with internal dialogue. Because I realized if one can do that, I wonder what would happen if I fill my entire day. So I did that. And that affirmation is 26 pages long. So I just started reciting that and filling that. So I noticed that I didn't have doubts if I did that, because my mind is focusing. I learned if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, it fills up with low priority distractions that don't. And if you don't fill your mind with the statements of exactly how you want your life, it fills up with statements about how you don't want it.
Yeah.
So I started realizing that I had more command over my mind, so I started using that.
Did you notice that that stuff on its own started attracting things into your life?
Absolutely.
More so than conscious effort would? Because I think for a lot of people listening, whether they're entrepreneurs or not, they think that, you know, to go out and make the money or build the business or create their impact, that they have to, quote unquote, do the work. And while they do have to do the work, what you're saying is that a bigger part of it is to get the perception right? The mindset right first.
Your perceptions, decisions, and actions are what you have control over in life. And if you take command of those, you take command of your life. And I learned about breathing. I was studying yoga. I realized that as the mind wanders, so does the breath. As the breath wanders, so does the mind. So I learned how to master the breathing process, master the mental focus, started to focusing on how I wanted it, my life, started drawing out vision. I mean, I was doing, before The Secret and all that stuff came out, I was doing that because Paul Bragg taught me that. So that went on, and throughout 18, and right before I was turning 19, just weeks before my 19th birthday, my mom came to me at home and she said, son, what do you want for your birthday? Your birthday's coming up and Christmas is coming up. What do you want for your birthday? And I looked at her and I said, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth, the greatest writings humanity's ever created from the greatest minds who ever lived. And she just kind of looked at me like, you sure you don't want a t-shirt? And I'm sitting there going, no, Mom, I want the greatest teachings on the face of the earth. She went, okay, let me see what I can do. Now, she happened to have a brother, who was my uncle Ralph, who was a professor at MIT, who was in physics and chemistry. And she contacted him, and as a gift, an extraordinary gift, he sent from where he lived on a flatbed truck 2 6-by-6-by-6-foot wooden crates that were lifted off the flatbed onto the ground, that I came out with a crowbar in, and unloaded thousands of books.
Wow.
And filled up my room with thousands of books, and had a little yoga mat facing the window for the sun salute in the morning. And I just started devouring and reading books. I really didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about anything but learning at the time. And I just started reading, and I started observing what worked and what didn't work on reading so I could read faster, what was working, not work on retention. And I learned that if I share with somebody what I learned, I retain the most. So I started to want to teach because I wanted to do it so I could learn.
Yeah, because then you learn it at an internal level.
Yeah.
You learn it good enough to teach.
So I did every opportunity I could to teach. Every opportunity I could do to teach. I would just start talking and waiting for people to gather. Yeah, I didn't care where.
Yeah.
Because I was doing it because I really wanted to know. I wanted to know the laws of the universe. I wanted to know what maximized human awareness and potential. I wanted to know what, how does somebody live an inspired and magnificent life? And I wanted to do, since the night I met Paul Bragg, I wanted to find someday when I'm his age, a 17-year-old man that I could pass the torch to. So I was on a vision to do that. I was not going to stop till I do it. I'm getting closer to that day. Yeah, I'm not quite old enough yet. I'm 65 in here in a few months, but I had that dream. So I just started pursuing that. When I went on to the University of Houston, I would sit under the trees and do yoga and eat an apple or something. and people gathered around and then asked questions. And I started having 100 to 150 students each day gather under the trees. And I started teaching. And if it rained, we'd go into the cafeteria. And some days it would swell to 400 people. So it'd be a whole park around. And we didn't have a microphone. So they'd just lean in and try to get the best they could. And people would say, this is what he said. And I was inspired by the idea that somebody would listen to me.
That's right.
And I was so grateful for the opportunity to be able to share. And then when I went on to professional school, I started teaching 6 and 7 days a week, pretty well 7 days a week. I'd get up at 2 a.m. I'd do yoga till 2:30. I would speed read books because I'd learned how to speed read by then. And I'd read maybe 4 to 7 books in the morning between 2:30 and 6:30. And then I would go out and jog, come back, shower, go to school, go to clinic, come over to the to the apartment, and I would teach. And I taught 3 hours every night. And I'd have 20 to 30 students in the class every night.
And were you charging money at the time?
$20.
$20 a night.
And so I was making enough money. I made $100,000 when I was 23, 24 years old, which paid for my school, my books, because I was buying 40 to 70 books a week. So I had to buy all the books. And I paid my rent, my clothing, everything was paid for that way.
And let me ask you this, when it came to money, because a lot of people struggle when they find their thing, right? So you found your gift, you found something that you loved so much that you wanted to give to the world. A lot of people might have found that gift, but are struggling to convert that into attracting people, attracting money. Can you zoom in on that and maybe share a lesson or two you learned about how to turn that and sort of attract money?
Yeah, well, I didn't start out at 20.
Right.
What I did is I put a bowl out and a love donation bowl.
Yeah.
And nobody loved me, apparently. And I got that from a church I'd seen. So I put this bowl out and stood by it at the end of my talk, hoping that people would kind of drop some cash in there. And I think I got $5. Then I put in there minimum low donation, $5, and I think I got 15 the next time. Then minimum low donation, $10, and I got about 25. And then I finally said, screw that, minimum fee, $20. And that was courageous for me because I was anxious about that, because that's like a rejection, right? So I put this thing down and I got $20, and I made $360. And that was a month's rent at the time. And I thought, I made that in a day. And I started doing it every night, and people just started getting used to paying $20. And I started doing local talks at health food stores and people's homes and wherever, any place I could go and speak, I was doing it.
And
I started teaching
tutoring.
tutoring.
You were charging for it too?
Well, the ones at school I didn't charge for, but the ones around I did, most of them, if I got them to invite me.
That's right.
If not, I'd do it at people's homes. I did that. And I was just grateful to get new people, because that was a way of networking. And I did that. And then when I graduated from professional school, I started continuing that process. I did it in my apartment. That's how I built my practice, speaking. And then I started doing classes in my office. And I ended up getting a big lecture hall in my office. And I'd have classes every night. And then I put megaphones. I remember I wanted to expand my thing, so I put these megaphones in these big light systems that you see in theater openings. And I put these things outside my office, and I put these megaphones, so the cinema complex that was attached to my office, people were going in at 7 or 7:30 at night. They could not hear me. So I'm lecturing. I got a video crew that's doing filming like this. And then I was doing live presentations and recording them, and people were coming in and parking and rolling down the windows and listening to me with the megaphones and just watching.
Wow.
And then, because I learned it from Robert Schuller.
Right.
And then I ended up, they'd come in and they'd buy the little what they call audio cassettes in those days. And I did that, and then did tours of my office, and my practice went flourishing.
Why do you think most people struggle to make money doing things similar? Like maybe they want to speak, or they want to teach, or maybe they, entrepreneurially are trying to do something. Where was your mindset at with money? And I know I keep asking about it, but it's because a lot of people struggle in that area. So talk to me a little bit about, what was it that you were doing psychologically that was sort of attracting it? Because it seems like you weren't too worried about the money. It was just sort of flowing in the momentum of what you were doing.
I don't want to make it that simple. When I was up to 27 years old, I had a good work ethic. I had no problem working. I've never had a problem working. I love working. I can work 20 hours a day. For 35 years, I worked 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't have any problem working. And some people think that's crazy, but I love it, because there's nothing more rewarding than doing something that makes a difference in people's lives and serving people and getting the rewards of that. But in this particular situation, when I first started, I would work, make money, and I would buy things, mainly books. and I was just would trust that somehow I'd always make the money to get what I wanted. And then a gentleman that my father, he had done some financial planning with a guy named Gil Baker, and he had a young financial planner that worked in his company, and he came to talk to me. And he asked me 10 questions. And those 10 questions changed my perception about money. He asked me, what is my total assets? At the time, I really didn't know. I wasn't focused on it. Then he asked me my total liabilities. And I knew I was in debt, but I didn't know because I just opened my practice. I got a new house. I got a new car. I was just...
In momentum.
I was in momentum. And he wanted to know what my total net worth is, asset minus liability. I really didn't know the number, and I realized I need to know that number. Because if I don't know where I'm starting from, I don't know where I want to go, and I don't know how I know I'm going to get there, I'm really not going anywhere. I knew that from Paul Bragg.
Right.
So then he asked me, how much do you want to live on passively, annually, from investments, a passive income? And at that time, $100,000 was still some sort of significance. And I thought, I guess that's good. A 6-digit figure would be good. And then he said, what is the average interest rate you can earn from your knowledge of investing? And I asked him, and he said, well, you could be conservative, and I think we put 7% or something. And then the next question, he says, what's the average inflation rate? And it was higher, but the average was a little bit lower, but it was high at the time. And I think we put that at 2%. And then how much is the total net worth you need to earn that interest minus that inflation to give you that number? And we calculated, he helped me calculate that, and I needed $2 million. And that seemed like a lot. I needed $2 million, earnings 7% minus 2% at 5% to give me $100,000 a year. And then he said, what's the shortfall? Well, I was actually in debt at the time. So I really needed more than $2 million. I didn't have a positive net worth at the time. And then I realized, okay, now I've got a knot in my stomach, got jaw tightness, you know, itchy butt. I'm really stressed.
Yeah.
Because I'm like going, oh my God, I don't really want to look at this. But he's making me look at it. He made me ground myself. And then he says, now how are you going to get there? Are you really serious about having money work for you, or are you going to work your whole life for money? And this is bad bringing up my dad now. Because my dad was trying to say, you know, at 9. So here I am 27, 3 times that age, and I still haven't really mastered wealth building. I'm just learning about it. So even though my dad tried to help me, and this guy's trying to help me. And I thought, how am I going to get there? And I had no idea. How am I going to get, because I was saving $200 a month, and I was paying off debts. And how am I going to get to what I need? And so I thought, well, I need 2 million something in the next 24 hours, or I need 1 million over the next 2 days, or 500,000 over the next 4 days, or 250,000 over the next 8 days, or 125,000 over the next 16 days. And I started thinking of, and it still was overwhelming. And finally I said, over the next 15 years, I need this amount. And I calculated out, and I needed to save over $20,000 a month over the next 15 years, every month, over 180 months to get where I wanted to go. Because by then, inflation would make it 4 million.
Right.
So I'm sitting there going, oh, crap. How am I going to get to this goal?
Right.
And I really felt like, I don't see it. This is overwhelming to me.
There's no way to make this
No
happen.
way I can do this. And the reason why 99% of the people don't have financial independence, even though they have the fantasy of it, is because they don't have the values, they haven't thought through the strategies, nobody cared enough to get them grounded, and they aren't committed to serving people to earn the money, because there's no limit on what you can do to serve people, so there's no limit on the money you can make. But you have to manage it wisely, because the hierarchy of your values dictates how you manage money. And I didn't have a value on wealth building at that time, until that day. And I realized that I was going to have to come up with a strategy, and an intuitive thing came in my mind, and I found a way. I'm going to start at $200 a month. In 3 months, I'm going to make it $300. In 3 months, I'm going to make it $500. In 3 months, I'm going to make it $750. In 3 months, I'm going to make it $1,000. And then I realized I was going to increase it 10% every quarter, every 3 months, increase the savings. So it would double the amount I was saving every 2 years. So it'd be 1,000, 2,000, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, $256,000 eventually per month. So I kept escalating it with what I call a force accelerated savings technique and a force accelerated investment technique. And I bought myself time to how to become more efficient at work, how to serve more people, how to make more income.
So you essentially learned how to pace the growth after you reverse engineered
and
it.
I saw light at the end of the tunnel on how I could do it.
Because now it was a simple step-by-step process.
See, I knew I could take that next step.
Exactly, yeah. So it wasn't overwhelming and you freeze up and, oh shit, what do I do?
By the inch, it's a cinch. Right, piggy banks become biggie banks. You got to do little steps make big dreams. And as Jim Collins later said in life, it's not this one thing that makes your life change. It's the little incremental changes that you make that make the big difference. And you build momentum.
I love that.
Like a domino, it's a bigger domino kind of thing.
And you gain speed and traction and confidence.
I studied the math of this, and I realized I could do it, and I followed it religiously. And I did it automatically with an electronic thing with a Schwab account at a discount broker. And I had it electronically done. I signed an agreement that they would do that every quarter, and I would figure out how to get that into the bank to make sure that they had it. And I moved myself into financial independence. It took me 9 years to be financially independent.
Do you think that having that system in place is what motivated you to have to make money? Because it's like, shit, I have to figure this out.
Well, what happened is when you manage money wisely, you get more money to manage. Money circulates through the economy from those who value it least to those who value it most, and where those who have the least order and organization around it to those who have the most order and organization around it. And I was organizing it and studying it. And I was reading on it. I started reading about finance. I read about 1,400 books on the topic.
And that alone was sort of pressuring you, or motivating, not pressuring you, but it was, I guess pressuring you to figure out ways to make more money.
Exactly.
How can I offer this, position this new?
Well, I started getting a value on it because it was like a baby. It's growing now. Once you have your baby, you go, okay, my baby's there.
Like I have to do it, not I want to. Yeah.
No, I wasn't even have to. It was inspiring. It was inspiring to watch that grow and inspiring to be able to serve, because I learned from Jim Parker that money received is a reflection of services rendered. And I realized that I wanted to serve people. And and the more I served, the more I served and deserved. And then I did something that was very significant for me. I started to create a cause for it, because I found out if I do it just for my own needs, it's not as motivating or inspiring
or compelling, yeah.
Yeah, I needed to have a cause. So I realized I wanted to do something with that, not just financial independent, because I knew I can do that now. What else do I want to do? Because otherwise you plateau. And that was a turning point. So yeah, I found that what it did is it made my company more efficient. And then I learned something right about the same time by a book called The Time Trap by Alex McKinsey. I learned that to make a list of everything I do in a day, and right next to it write down how much does it produce per hour, and right next to that is how much meaning does it have, and right next to that, how much does it cost to hire somebody to do it for you, to look at the spreads, how much time is spent a day on it. And then I reprioritized it. After prioritizing the whole thing, I reprioritized it and then layered out delegations and delegated those things. And in 15 months, my business went more than tenfold. And all of a sudden, now I'm paying off my debts at fast rates, and I'm getting to save more and more. And so I learned that every quarter when I raised my savings, I delegated some more stuff. And I shed things, because I wanted to do only the highest priority things. I learned from Mary Kay Cosmetics around 34 years ago. So this is sometime around that time, just within that time, that every day I asked her, what is the most advice you could give to a young speaker? She said, every day write down the 6 or 7 highest priority things you can do each day that can help you fulfill your dream. And write them down, and then go do them and reward yourself, and make sure they're daily actions, not projects that take weeks, but daily actions. So I did that, and I found out that the highest priorities every day were the same priorities that I found by doing that other exercise. And mine turned out to be research, write, travel, teach. So I then said, I'm delegating everything off my plate except research, write, travel, teach. And I'm going to master those things. And I'm going to let go of everything else. I'm not going to do things that devalue me. Because as long as I do things that lower on my values, I devalue myself. And as long as I stick to the highest priority things, I value myself. And until I value me, the world's not going to value me. So my responsibility was to do the highest priority things that serve the greatest number of people, that valued myself, because it was inspiring and meaningful to me. And then it catalyzed growth. And it made my company more efficient, so the profit margins were way higher. Started out very low, and it got really decent. Like I was saving 53% of the gross income of my business after a while. And I found out that I achieved it. And then I didn't raise my lifestyle. Many people just raise their lifestyle.
Right.
But I made a rule that not to raise my lifestyle unless I raised my savings and taxes equal amount. So that kept it in check. That way I accelerated the savings and investments, and I let my lifestyle be moderated. and not let immediate gratification cost me this long-term vision.
Beautiful.
And then I was able to eventually get that where it was making me the money to have the lifestyle I wanted.
Beautiful. Now, 2 questions stem from that. One is, what would your advice be to somebody who's maybe stuck or in a stress situation, right? Maybe maybe they didn't find their purpose early on, right? Maybe they're in their mid-20s or mid-30s or mid-40s or maybe even older than that. And they're trying to figure out, how to figure out what their values are. What are the things that mean the most to them? How do they serve the world and make money doing it? But maybe they're pinched, maybe they're broke, maybe they're in debt, and they feel flustered. What would Dr. John Demartini's best advice be to people in that situation who are kind of in a financial funk, mental funk, professional funk, on how to realign and get moving fast?
Well, in the 1980s, when I opened my practice as 82, in 1983, I started speaking at a big conference called the Parker Seminars. And I started meeting a lot of doctors, thousands of doctors. And then I started speaking for other consulting companies and going and consulting with other doctors' offices, some of which I still have friends today with. And when I was doing that, I noticed a number of things that was really significant. I noticed there was a lot of talk about purpose, and I felt I had that, but I watched a lot of people not really have that. They didn't have clarity of that. And they were floundering around in that. And I noticed that the ones that were clear, they definitely did more than the people that were kind of floundering around. And I also noticed that a lot of people were subordinating to outer authorities in the consulting companies and trying to be somebody they're not, and then defeat themselves and beat themselves up going, why can't I do like this guy does or this gal does?
Right.
And I was thinking, why is it that they're having difficulty doing that? And I learned the significance of human values, because I realized that everybody has a set of priorities, a set of values in their life. And whatever's highest on their value, they spontaneously do with no effort. And whatever's low on the values, they have to get motivated to do from external sources. So you need to be reminded and motivated, and that's least efficient. You're not going to go any places if you need to be motivated.
It's not sustainable, yeah.
Not sustainable. You have to be intrinsically called to do something if you want to excel.
Where it's automatic, yeah.
Where it's just you.
Spontaneously inspired from within, as you say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I noticed that the people that were aligned to the values of the mentors, they were excelling, and the ones that weren't were struggling. And I realized how important that became, and I really made an effort to master values. So I really started devouring these over 40 years ago. And I devoured everything I could get on those. And in the process of doing that, I noticed that most people, when you ask them what their values are, they'll tell you social idealisms. And they're injecting, as Kohlberg says, ideals from mother, father, preacher, teacher, and social peer groups and mores and traditions and conventions of different levels of the dynamic of society that they're subordinating to. And Emerson said, envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Be yourself. Stand out as an authority and be an unborrowed visionary instead of borrowed visionary. And so I wanted to know what that was, and I started developing kind of a questionnaire on how to determine somebody's values that would be objective.
I've actually taken that test. I love it, yeah.
And I started realizing that if you just ask somebody what their values are, they'll tell you social idealisms based on what they expect by society to conform.
Right, yeah.
And you're not going to be exceptional and really unique if you do that. And you rob yourself of your own individual creativity. So I then realized that I had to create a system for that for myself and the people I cared about. And I started to look at what would be the most efficient, objective ways to look at what people do. And I realized that when their life demonstrates their values, what their life demonstrates is what I'm interested in. So what they tell me, if it's not demonstrated, there's a lie. So if I said that my highest value was cooking and cupcake decorating,
yeah.
but I didn't do it, then it's a lie. So I had to look at what my life really demonstrated and look at what was really important to me and make sure those are congruent. That's integrity. And I noticed that people were all over the place. They were not that way. And so I started to look at what they actually do, not what they tell me. Because they're not walking their talk, they're limping their life. And I looked at how they felt their space. Because I found from children all the way to adults, things, if you got a little baby in a little crib and you give it something and it doesn't want it, it pushes it aside and gets it out of the crib.
It's intuitive, yeah.
Yeah, and if it likes it, it pulls it in, puts it in the mouth usually. And I started watching that human behavior does that. And when things are proximal, it's important to them. And if they want to push it away and not have it in their space, it's not important. So I looked at how people fill their space. I looked at how they spend their time, because they made time, found time, and spend time on things that are valuable. I look at what they're energized by, because when they're doing something really inspiring to them and really high in their values, the day would go by quick. They didn't even take a break. They didn't think about anything. All they wanted to do is do what they're doing.
Time flies.
Time just
disappears.
zips by.
Yeah.
Einstein said when you're kissing a girlfriend, two hours slips by like 2 minutes. When you're waiting for a freight train, 2 moments seems like 2 hours.
Right.
And I realized, okay, so what is they spending their time on? And then next is what is it that energizes them? And then next one is what do they spend their money on? Because if it's really valuable to them, they'll find the money for it.
That's right.
And if it's not valuable to them, no, I don't want to pay that. So I looked at how their disbursements and how their money was spent. Then I look at where they're organized, because I noticed that people were really inspired by something. They had a lot of order around it, and they structured their life to get it to be done. And when it wasn't important, they just never got around to organizing things to make it happen, because order is part of what makes things build momentum. Then I looked at where they're disciplined, spontaneously disciplined to do things. You can rely on me to be researching and teaching and traveling and speaking. You don't ever have to know. You can go, where's John? You know he's doing that. So where is it that you do that nobody has to remind you to do? That's important. And then I looked at what is it you think about internally about how you want your life that shows evidence coming true. What are you thinking about and actually bringing about? What are you visualizing about how you want your life that shows evidence coming true? What are you internally talking to yourself about? Not your negative self-talk, but the talk that's actually things you really want that's coming true. So in my case, I was saying to myself, I'm an international professional speaker traveling over the world, inspiring millions of people around the world. That was what was in my head, right? I have a photographic, autographic mind, whatever I read or retain, right? I had these internal things, and these were becoming real. So I want to know what I'm saying to myself that's actually becoming real. And then I looked at what do I want to converse with other people about? Because I noticed that when people come up to me and said, how's your kids? They had a value on kids. How's business? They had a value on business. How's your investments? How's your exercise? How's fitness? They'd ask me things. What are you doing for spiritual fulfillment? They would always want to talk about what was valuable to them. And I looked at what do I want to talk about? What do people want to talk about? And what they converse about, and they'll talk all night about it. What do they get engaged in talking about? Then what inspires them and brings tears to their eyes? Everybody reads, watches movies, sees things and stuff that bring a tear to their eye. What is it that brings a tear of inspiration? And what's common to the people that do that? I want to know what that is. And then I look at what is it that you have that's persistent and consistent in your goals that are what you're pursuing and that you want to come true that are showing evidence of manifesting. And the last one is what is it you love studying about, reading about, learning about, listening to, and watching on YouTubes and videos that you can't wait to get that information. You're wanting to absorb that information.
Automatically you want
Automatically you want to learn about it.
Yeah.
Because I noticed that some people go, and if you look at all their YouTube things, it's all about business, or it's about finance, or it's about spirituality, or it's because they're drawn to that. If they go to the bookstore, they go that section. I'm looking for what's the top 3 answers for each of those 13 value determinants. And I'm looking for the most consistent answer. And if they're not consistent answers, there's a lie, because I've been doing this for over 40 years. And if it's consistent, you know what their values are. And the one that shows up most frequent, second most frequent, third most frequent are the top 3 values. And those are pretty solid. If it's done properly, you get a real sense for what it is. Now, once they have that, if they structure their life around that, they're going to excel. Because that's where they're spontaneous. That's where they're excellent. That's when they can't wait to get up in the morning and do it. And they'll endure pain and pleasure in pursuit of it. Like a boy who loves video games won't stop. And he'll just keep going after the next video game and take on the challenge to do it. That's the person who's the entrepreneur in the making. They're not living in security. They're into self-actualization. So I want to know what that is. And I try my best to give people that insight because I know it gives them an advantage. And the majority of people are walking around clueless about what they really want and fitting in instead of standing out.
Why do you think most people do that? Why do you think most people just never take the time to get clear on what their values
Because
are?
they compare themselves to others. They put other people on pedestals. They minimize themselves. They think they've got something they don't. They're too humble to admit what they see in them as inside themselves. They play small and shrink instead of shine, right? And they envy other people, try to imitate other people, and they lose themselves and cloud the clarity of their own calling. And they hold themselves back from something great. And it's not that it's missing, it's not, but dormant. The second they get back and find out what that value is, and the second they get prioritized and learn to delegate lower priority things and get on with the other one and do something that serves people to earn an income to pay for the delegation, they liberate themselves from the mediocre life and they start building momentum to do something amazing. And I've trained thousands of people in doing that. And I'm absolutely certain it can change for people's lives if they start mastering that skill.
Now, how do people change their values? They say they have a set of values and they want to realign them because their life, like let's say somebody's life right now, for lack of a better word, sucks, right? Or they feel like it sucks because they're not spontaneously inspired from within to do anything. Maybe they're in a line of work they don't enjoy. Maybe, maybe they built a certain amount of momentum, but they're just not fulfilled inside. How do they sort of untangle that web and rearrange those values to serve them?
Before I ever try to change their values, I first crack their fantasies. Because the reason they're unfulfilled is not their values. The reason they're unfulfilled is because they're expecting to live in somebody else's values that they're injecting with their values. And anytime you expect to live in somebody else's values, not your own, you do what Einstein said. If you're a cat expecting to swim like a fish, you'll beat yourself up thinking you're a terrible cat. If you're a fish expecting to climb like a tree, you're going to beat yourself up. Can I share a story about that?
Absolutely.
I don't know how much time we have. So I have this doctor who comes to me and he says, Dr. Demartini, I want you to help me become successful. And I said, okay. My first question is, where are you successful? He looked at me and he goes, Dr. Demartini, you didn't hear me. I'm not successful. I want you to make me successful. And I said, well, you didn't hear me. I'm asking you, where are you successful? He goes, but I'm not. I said, I believe you are. So I'm going to ask you to dig deeper and find it. And finally he looks and he goes, well, okay, I have an amazing relationship with my wife. We've been married for over 10 years and we really have a great relationship and that's inspiring to me. Great. Where else are you successful? Okay. I have a son who's in baseball, who's 12 years old, or 10 years old, I mean, and who is, we may win the pennant. I'm his coach and we may win the pennant this year. Great. Where else is successful? Well, we all work in the yard as a family. We got the most beautiful yard in the neighborhood, and we're going to win the yard of the summer. Where else is she successful? Well, my mother-in-law lives with us, and most people don't get along with their mother-in-law, but she's amazing, and we really get along, and it's really a close family, and it's really lovely, and I think that's a success. And what else? Well, on Wednesdays and Sundays, I work in my church, and I'm a lay minister, and I've been wanting to do that since my 20s, and I'm doing it. And I said, great. So can you see you have some successes? Yes, or what people call success,
right.
Achievements. He goes, yes. I said, the only reason you're thinking you're unsuccessful is because you're comparing yourself to somebody. So who is it? He goes, I think I know who it is. I said, well, who is it? He says, well, there's a guy up on top of the hill. He's got a 6,000 square foot house, and he's got a 3-car garage and lots of fancy cars, and he's got a big practice, makes a lot of money, and he's kind of like a leader in our profession. And yeah, I guess I'm comparing myself to that. I said, great. I got something to share with you here now. Do you know him well? He goes, yeah. Is he married? Yes. Does he have children? Yes. You have a son? Yes. How's his relationship with his wife? Oh, he says, well, it's interesting you ask that. It's very turmoiled. It's very challenging. They sometimes talk about divorce, and it's crazy, and they have a lot of fights and yells, and it's very volatile. And I said, okay. And what about his son? Well, they're having problems with him in school, and he's doing drugs, and he's not engaged, and he's a spoiled little thing. And what about his yard that you're excelling at? Well, yeah, they got people to take care of the yard. I don't think they even notice. Sometimes they drive right over the grass. And what about the mother-in-law? Oh, yeah, they moved out of the country to get away from her. And what about church and the services and stuff? Oh, no, they're not people that would do that. That's not their thing. And I said, I got a question for you. If I could have you swap roles and you had to live that man's life, and you could have the big practice and the 6,000 square foot home and the big car, but you had to have your relationship with your wife had to be his. The relationship with your son had to be that. Your relationship spiritually at the church had to be that. You had the same thing in the yard. Would you swap? He goes, oh, no. I said, how come? He said, I wouldn't want that. I said, well, let me explain to you something. That man's not more successful than you. He looked at me and paused for a second. He's not more successful. His achievements are according to his values. And he has a high value on business and finance and a lower value on spirituality and family. You have a very high value on spirituality and family and a lower value on business and finance. I said, if you expect to live in his values, you're going to beat yourself up. If you expected him to live in your values, he's going to beat himself up. So he's not more achieving and successful than you. He has a different form of achievement, and his values are. So unless I change your values, it's unrealistic to expect that. And if you change those values, are you willing to have the chaos he has in those areas that are now lower on your values? And he goes, that's a good question. I said, before I change your values, I want you to make sure you don't live in a fantasy that you're going to get his and your life, because that's not how it works with this set of values. And he goes, got it. I said, I think it's wise to appreciate who you are and quit putting false expectations on yourself, because anytime you expect yourself to live outside your own hierarchy of values, you're going to beat yourself up. And the beating yourself up is a feedback to let you know you're setting unrealistic expectations on yourself to be somebody you're not, instead of understanding the magnificence of who you are. And he was really grateful for that. But then he hinted, he says, is there any way I could at least put a little bit more cash flow in my pocket? I said, I can change that, but just remember that once I shift your values, make something higher, something else gets lower.
So is that an inevitable part of it? Does that mean that you can't have it all to some degree?
No, you can.
Okay.
You can. But there's an art.
Okay.
And that is to be able to see the new forms that it's in. For instance, in my case, I love traveling and teaching, right? So I may be sitting in front of a large audience, and that is my social life. That is my business.
Gotcha.
That is my economics.
So you have to creatively mold
That is
them.
my spiritual view. They're like my family. They're my intellectual stimulus. So I've structured it and linked those 7 areas to my highest values in such a way that I'm seeing and allowing the adaptability to whatever is happening in my life to help me get the form. And knowing that whatever I think is missing isn't missing, it's in a form that I'm here to honor. And then I'm adaptable and resilient and less stressed and don't age. So there's an art of being able to perceive things in a way where no matter what you're perceiving that you think is missing isn't missing, and you find the form that it's in.
I love that. And then yesterday I was sitting in your event, and you said something very powerful. You said that basically twofold. Number one, that there is no success without failure to some degree, right? That those constructs are sort of fallacies in that you said you're a man on a mission. You're not a man pursuing success. Can you elaborate your perception on success and failure and why so many people are chasing it and probably
Getting addicted to one side.
Yeah, getting addicted to one side and then disappointed when they don't have it, feeling like, oh, if you're successful in all areas. But can you just shed a little bit of light on context on that?
I don't like to label myself successful. People do it all the time. They go,
Right.
oh, Dr. Demartini, you're a success. How did you get successful? All that stuff.
Right.
I said, I don't perceive myself as success. I perceive myself as a man on a mission. Because the second I think I'm successful, I'm usually puffed up, proud, and exaggerating myself and blind to my downsides and where I'm not putting my energies. And if I'm in a failure mode, I'm blind to the upsides. And I'm polarizing something that's actually deserves to be synthesized. And as you know, in my class last night, we had a lovely lady there. I said, go to a moment when you perceive yourself proud and you think you're successful. Yes. And at that moment, what are you feeling failure at? And she goes, oh my God, you're right. And one was in business and the other one was family, or vice versa. And I explained to her that the mind, the second it gets elevated into a higher self-esteem, it automatically goes into the other side as an anti-form to humble that, to get you centered, to be authentic. Because pride is not who you are, and shame is not who you are. Who you are is your heart. And in the center, in fact, the courage, the word courage comes from the root, heart. And the person who really has courage in life is not somebody that overcomes a fear. It's the person that actually has the courage to be authentic in a society that's demanding you not to be. That's what courage really means. That's what the great Greeks understood as one of the 4 cardinal virtues. So courage basically meant the heart, to live in the heart.
So the goal is to be balanced.
To be balanced and not puff yourself up or beat yourself up. Because if you puff yourself up, you attract tragedies and hubris to get you back in equilibrium. And if you beat yourself up, people lift you up. And nature, your physiology, your psychology, your sociology, and your theology is all trying to get you authentic. And your brain is a highest value seeking organ, which is where you're most objective, trying to get you back into balance. It's a homeostat. And it's electronically and literally collectively, and as far as the psyche's information, and also biochemically, all trying to get you into equilibrium. I've been studying neurology for over 40 years. I'm amazed at how magnificent that brain is on trying to homeostate human beings into authenticity.
So how does somebody stay centered when, say they go through like a breakup and they're emotionally rocked, or say they go through, financial hardship, or their marriage is suffering, or whatever it is? What you're saying, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but what you're saying is to basically acknowledge both sides of the equation, the good in the equation and the bad in the equation, or the challenge in the equation, and sort of come to a balance where you
I wouldn't put the labels good and bad, because
right.
that's an illusion.
That's true, yeah.
Those are just ratios of perceptions.
Well, yeah, I guess a better way to phrase it would be, both sides of the coin.
Well, if somebody's leaving you in a marriage, your heart must have not been with them. Because if it was, you would care enough about them to make sure you're communicating what you value in terms of what they value. So if they're leaving, that means that their values aren't being met. Okay? Nobody's committed to you. That's the delusion people have is, oh, I got my ring now you're committed to me. No, the ring doesn't mean that. What it means is that you now have the beginning. You're just now beginning after you get to marriage now to learn how to consistently keep current with their values and learn how to provide in their values more effectively than any competition. And as long as you do that, they're going to stick around for you. But if you think that, okay, I've got my ring, I can take them for granted, then you're running a risk of them finding somebody else. Because just like money circulates through the economy from those who value it least to those who value it most, people circulate through society from those who value them least to those who value them most.
Based on their values. Yeah.
On their values.
Yeah.
So if you're not valuing them and their values, which is what I'm training people in my programs right now, don't expect them to be loyal to you, because they're not loyal to you. They're loyal to their values, their highest value. So if their high identity revolves around their highest value. So if all of a sudden you have a loss of somebody, if you had a fantasy of who they were and you didn't communicate in their real values, and you're having an affair with a fantasy figure and they leave, it's there to teach you how to love somebody. And that's not a bad thing. That's teaching you how to really love somebody and respect somebody. And so if you're infatuated with them and you have a crush on it, you need to break that infatuation, because an infatuation and a fantasy on that is not who they are. That's why nobody's worth putting on pedestals or pits. Everybody's worth putting in hearts. And if you have them in your heart, you don't have them on a fantasy. And when you do, you let them come and go. When you love somebody, they can come and go without attachment. It's just love.
So why does ego exist to say, like, oh no, how dare they, or they must be with me?
Well, that's our delusion. Because we think that our values are more important than theirs. We're projecting our fantasies of how they're supposed to be in our life. And when they don't do it, we're now angry. And then when they all of a sudden don't feel love for that fantasy we projected, and they go somewhere else because they have somebody that loves them for who they are, why would we expect anything else? That's normal for them to want to go find somebody to love them for who they are. Every human being wants to be loved and appreciated for who they are, not for the fantasies we project onto them. And a lot of our infatuations are fantasies, not love.
Now, what are your thoughts on depression?
Well, I define depression as a comparison of your current reality to a fantasy that you're addicted to of how life's supposed to be. And I found 15 common ones that are most common in people who have depression. And I work with it every week.
And this relates to depression, stress, overwhelm.
Any form of depression, I find that. Now, your pharmaceutical representatives of medicine and psychiatry want you to believe it's a biochemical imbalance.
Right.
But I've yet to see one that I can't neutralize.
Well, you said something very interesting yesterday that says that everybody's constantly in a chemical imbalance to some degree.
They're fluctuating constantly.
Yeah, nobody's chemicals are just perfectly even all the time.
No, because your perceptions are fluctuating all the time. Sometimes you're perceiving things in a way that you think there's going to be more positive negatives, and sometimes more negatives than positives. And when there's more positive negatives, your dopamine, your oxytocin, your vasopressin, your enkephalins, endorphins, and your serotonins are up. And your histamine and testosterone and cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine, substance P are all down. But if you see more drawbacks and benefits and more challenge and support, the other ones come online. They go up and the other ones go down. So you're gyrating your chemistry is based on your perceptions. And if you haven't mastered your ability to change your perceptions and balance them out with your intuition and asking proper questions, you're going to be gyrating all over the place. Your chemistry is going to be all over the place. And you're going to be, in a sense, a cyclothymic state instead of a euthymia. Euthymia means a relatively balanced, centered state. You'll be eccentric all the time. And that's instability. And when you infatuate and resent with things, those things occupy space and try to remind and run you. And you run from the external world instead of run from within. And governmentus, the word government, comes from governmentus, one who can govern their own mind, which means to reduce the amplitudes of all those infatuations, resentments, and impulses and instincts that stop people from being present and empowered.
So what are some daily practical tips that you would give advice to people on how to develop their intuition, on how to develop their balance, on how to develop truly living their life at the best of their ability?
When I was about 30, I guess, when I moved into my second office, I noticed some very interesting things. I noticed that when I had a really big day, and I noticed myself going, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of puffing up.
Yeah.
I think I'm successful.
Dr. Demartini.
Dr. Demartini, touch me, you'll feel better about yourself, kind of thing. I noticed that when I would go home, I'd get nailed. I'd just get slammed because I'm puffed up and I'm above equilibrium. And if anytime you walk into a crowd of people, they have an image of what they perceive you to be. And anytime you're puffed up beyond that, you're going to get criticism. Donald Trump's a good example right now. And it's like, but anytime you go below that, they're going to lift you up. So if I walk into a room and somebody says, "Oh, Dr. Demartini, you're an amazing guy," and I go, "Well, thank you," and I'm really humble, and I go talk to my girlfriend, she may have a different view, and I kind of minimize myself a bit,
Right.
They'll keep lifting me up.
Right.
Because I'm below where they want to put me. But if I walk in and they go, "Oh, you're an amazing guy," I go, "Finally, you figured it out. I'm more amazing than you can even comprehend.
Yeah.
I'm more amazing than I even know. Peon."
Yeah.
When I put them down and exaggerate me, what are they going to do? They're going to turn around and criticize me immediately. Because the second I put myself above what they perceive me to be, criticism is a spontaneous response. And anytime I put myself lower than what they want me to be, support is a response. So I sat there and I have these puffed up days. I go home and I get nailed. And I thought she was toxic, my wife. She was actually caring, trying to get me in the center. But I was addicted to the pride. And the addiction to pride attracts the criticism to get you back in equilibrium. And you think it's because those people are critical, but they're actually doing you a favor, getting you back into authenticity. But I didn't understand that. And then if I had a low day, I come home and she would lift me up. And I thought, man, she's toxic. She's only supporting me if I'm down. But what I did realize sooner or later, that instead of me being up and down and having volatilities in my business is all gyrating all over the place, which is less effective in having predictability, is I would ask myself if I had a puffed up day, what patient's name did I forget? What staff member did I not thank? What procedure did I overlook? And I learned to humble myself and govern myself, because if you don't govern yourself from within, you have to be governed without. And people in prison haven't been able to learn to govern themselves within, so they have to be governed without.
Wow. Holy shit.
And so if you don't govern yourself from within as a master, you're going to be a slave, and you're going to be governed from that. So if I was up, I'd ask questions to bring me down. If I was down, I asked, who did I serve? What name did I remember? What birthday did I remember? Who did I thank today? And I learned to neutralize myself before I would leave the office as the sun is setting at night. When I go home, I had a loving wife. There's like an entanglement between two people. And if I'm above, she's going to bring me down. If I'm below, she lifts me up. If I'm neutral and I'm really loving, I had stability. So what I noticed is when I started charting what my practice was doing, and the second I started that exercise, which I still have those questions today, my practice was stable. And it was predictable growth. And I was strategic instead of emotional. And emotions destroy wealth, and emotions destroy businesses, and emotions destroy relationships, and it destroys social leadership skills. Because if you don't have governance over yourself, don't expect to govern anybody else. And that was a very important clue that a person can incorporate immediately. And then I developed my own DEMARTINI method, which is a series of 80 questions that are very specific and refining questions to help govern yourself and to govern all emotions and to return them back to thank you, I love you. Because anything we can't say thank you, I love you to runs our life until we do. And every human being wants to be loved and appreciated. And so if you're not doing it, you're not going to get maximum impact in the world. And so I developed a science to help people take whatever they've been through, nothing their mortal body can experience that they can't love with their mortal soul, to bring it back to thank you, I love you, by the series of questions we ask. And that's what our intuition's constantly trying to do. If we're infatuated, our intuition's trying to find the downsides. If we're resentful, our intuition's trying to find the upsides. So it's trying to equilibrate the mind. And the second we do, we feel grace and love. And so my method was designed to assist people in doing that, instead of having to wait for the wisdom of the ages with the aging process, to have the wisdom of the ages without it, by knowing how to ask the question and be poised. You don't have as much aging, you're more inspired, you accomplish more, you empower all areas of your life by doing that. There's so many benefits of learning the mastery of the voice and the vision on the inside, bringing back to balance.
That's beautiful. Now, I do want to ask a couple quick last questions here. When it comes to your values, right? When it comes to raising your values, can you talk a little bit about some of those? You had some powerful one-liners where you were talking about yesterday, and you mentioned it earlier in the interview, that if you don't fill your day with higher priority values, inevitably your day is going to fill up with low priority values, and you're going to have a day that doesn't inspire you. Can you talk about some other quick concepts like that, just so people can retain, maybe go on a tangent, because when you're on tangents, you seem to flow really well on that. But can you shed some insight on that, just so people, because I want people who are listening to not just get the philosophical constructs you're sharing, but also ways in which they can immediately implement them to their day-to-day life through these simple concepts.
Let me develop that, because there's a thing in physics that Clausius in 1859 composed called the laws of thermodynamics. And the second law of thermodynamics after the first one, that there's conservation and symmetry, is the law of entropy. And he basically said that all things are moving towards from order to randomness or disorder. In 1944, another book came out called What is Life by Erwin Schrödinger, another Nobel Prize winner. And he basically wrote a book called on negentropy, the negative entropy, the reverse of entropy, which is life physics, not death physics, from disorder to order. And a guy named Luigi Fontoppi, many years before, was writing about a thing called syntropy, the ability to see the hidden order in the chaos so you could transform entropy into negentropy, life physics. And he said the universe has got a balance of those two, but most people don't see it and they're stuck in the entropy. So what I realized is that if we don't fill our day with order, it fills up with disorder. And consciousness underlies both. And consciousness, a panpsychic consciousness, as some great philosophers and even Nobel Prize winners have acknowledged. Even Freeman Dyson at the Institute of Advanced Studies, I've had dialogues with, and he understands this. There's a panpsychic underlying field that underlies space, time, energy, and matter. And when you're able to see the hidden order in things, and you're in an unconditional grace for that, you move into negentropy, and you move uphill against entropy. And when you don't, and you're in a conditional state of emotions, run by your senses and your perceptions that are polarized and judging, you're gravitationally pulled to the earth with entropy, and you decay and age. Because entropy is the arrow of time, and once you have memory and imagination separated in time, you have aging. If you have a timeless mind, ageless body, as Deepak says, you don't have aging. So every time you know how to ask the right question to see the hidden order in your daily chaos, which is what the Demartini method's for, you now can stop the aging process and get present. Because in presence, there's no time. And so, again, if you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, it's designed to fill up with low priority distractions that don't, to create chaos. That chaos is a feedback to our consciousness to let us know we're not being and honoring the beauty of the universe. We're not living authentically.
So we crave order, essentially, in order to win.
There's a yearning for seeing the hidden order in the chaos. And this is why, no matter what in science says about entropy and heat death and thermodynamic entropy and equilibrium, there's a theological side to it that's trying to find the order in the universe. And they're at odds with each other, they think, but actually there's a higher order to both. So the individual that can ask the right questions that the intuition is attempting to do is a negative feedback system to get them back into order. The moment they do that, they have command of their life. And they exemplify what's possible for a human being, and they magnetize people around them because everybody wants to be in that state innately.
Yes, even if they're not consciously aware of this line of thinking.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and they're a leader. They exemplify. Einstein said the greatest teacher is exemplification. So if you exemplify that, the world is yours. And you're not a local person. I remember reading Epictetus, and he was talking about Socrates, and they asked him, where does he live? And Socrates said, well, I'm not a man of Corinth. I'm not a man of Athens. I'm a citizen of the universe. And Einstein, when they asked him, I'm not a man of my local family, my community, my city, my state, my nation. I'm a citizen of the world and the universe. Because what happens is the second you're living negentropically, and you live by priority, and you're really objective, and you see the hidden order, and you're poised, and you're present, and you're powerful, and you're prioritized, and you're patient, you're empowered in such a way that you expand your space and time horizons, and your vision goes beyond your life. You leave a legacy, and you exemplify what's possible, and there's a massive impact on the life that you give, like a Gandhi or something, or a Nelson Mandela. But if not, you're living in time, and you're shrinking, and you're ending up with immediate gratification and compensation back in the amygdala instead of the executive center. And you're losing out on your magnificence.
Yeah, you're playing small.
You're playing small.
Okay. Some quick fire-off questions for people who wrote in mentioning they had some questions. Number one, how do you find your calling or purpose in life? If you're, say somebody's listening to this around the world, and we've got over 4.5 million people, so say someone's listening to this around the world, they're trying to find their purpose in life. What do you recommend they do? Do they meditate? Do they journal? Do they sit down and get in touch with themselves? How do they develop their intuition to even understand it? What would your most practical, concise piece of advice be to somebody who wants more, wants to be aligned? They've tried a bunch of things, but nothing's working.
There's a bunch of things. First, do the Demartini method value determination process. And go online. It's complimentary on my website, drdemartini.com.
And we'll put a link for it in the description below wherever you guys are watching this.
Make them go there and do that. Not just one time, do that. A week later, do it again. A month later, do it again. And look for the common threads and make sure and you can store it on there. You just can watch the change. And make sure you're answering that objectively. Don't write down what you wish it would be, hope it would be, think it should be. Write down what your life demonstrates, because your life demonstrates what you value, and your highest value is your purpose. Your very highest value is your telos, your purpose, where the most meaning is in life, most inspiration, where you're spontaneous. Finding out what that highest value is the first step. If you look carefully what you do spontaneously that nobody has to remind you to do every single day, you just do it. Nobody has to remind you to do it. Look there. You may be comparing it to other people and not appreciating what that calling is. and therefore think you don't know what it is, but your life is demonstrating it. Your life is demonstrating your purpose every single day. But you can't see it because you're comparing yourself to others and thinking it's not good enough. And therefore you're devaluing what is actually your calling.
Which could make you the money, which could give you the impact, which could give you the fulfillment.
If you ask the question, there's 7 questions you want to ask yourself every day. What is it I would absolutely love to do in life? How do I get handsomely paid to do it? Don't ever ask, how do I afford to do it? That's a debt thinking. How do I get handsomely and beautifully paid to do what I love? What are the highest priority actions I can do today to make that happen? What obstacles might I run into, and how do I solve in advance with foresight and planning? What worked and what didn't work today? How do I do it more effectively and efficiently tomorrow? And how did, no matter what happened today, how did it get me one step closer to that? If you ask those 7 questions, quite amazing things start happening in your life. But if you look carefully at what you're inspired to do that nobody has to remind you to do, you go and do the value determination. You go look at what's common to the people who have been the most inspiring people in your life, and look at what's common to them. And look at all the jobs you had, and look at what's common to all those jobs that had meaning to your life. All of them are pointing to that same direction. And if you do one more thing, look at moments when you had tears of inspiration. Anytime you had music, anytime you read a book, anytime you watched a movie that brought a tear of inspiration, capture that moment of tear of inspiration. Find out what exactly the content of your mind is at that moment, and keep them on a list, and you'll see that it's revealing what it is. All those things together will all point to the same thing. And if you have to ask the question, it's not it. Because when it's it, you'll be certain.
You'll know.
You'll know, because your heart is so open from it, you'll have tears in your eyes, and you'll be in a transcendental state instead of the immanent-minded state where you're caught with the outer world. You're functioning from an inner world. And you don't need motivation. I captured that when I was 17. I've never needed motivation to do research, traveling, teaching, and stuff like that. But I would need motivation for anything else.
Beautiful. Now, the second question is what to look for in an ideal significant other or partner?
Well, whatever you're looking for in a partner, you're going to be looking for things that are similar to you probably, because you get infatuated with that.
Sure.
When you see more similarities and differences, more sames and differences, more positives and negatives, you have infatuation. We typically start there. But what happens is no human being is one-sided. Everybody's got both sides. There's nice and mean and kind and cruel and positive, negative, etc. So when the other side comes, because you're addicted to that, this one's going to hurt. And they're going to have that side too. They're going to have the things you like and dislike. When you can embrace somebody for the likes and the dislikes, and you somehow just know that there's somebody there that you embrace both sides to and love both sides, you got a partner. If you're talking down to them and you feel like you can live without them that way, you probably got them as an underdog. And they may look up to you, and you may be addicted to somebody looking up to you, but that's a short-term relationship.
Right.
If you're sitting there as the underdog and you're minimizing them, why would they stay with you? That's not going to work. You want a match. And the way you know you have a match is you have a bantering. A bantering is where you can confront them, you can challenge them, you can support them, and it goes back and forth, and you keep each other in check. And you'll know that because there's just something about them you respect. And there's a respect there. You're not infatuated with them, you're not resentful to them, there's a respect to them. If you look down to them, you're careless. If you look up to them, you're careful. If you look across to them, you're caring. And that's the one that keeps the rings on the finger.
Beautiful. Now, say someone, again, focused on money, since entrepreneurs are our dominant audience, how does somebody manifest building a big business and becoming a multimillionaire? Does it go back to the values again?
Well, Hubert Hal Bancroft in his book of Wealth said that there were 3 things common to the wealthy people in history. They felt that there's by divine providence and human sovereignty, they were destined to serve vast numbers of people. So if you don't have a feeling that I am here to serve, and you care, if you don't care about serving people, it's unrealistic to expect to be wealthy. I was speaking at a church not too long ago and said, if you're poor, it's because you don't care about humanity. And that was an interesting response.
Very powerful.
People are like going, oh, wait a minute now.
Yeah, of course.
But if you really care about humanity, you're going to want to know what their needs are, their problems are, and you're going to want to find solutions directly or indirectly through yourself or somebody else that can have those, and you're going to want to try to bring those solutions to people. And the people that bring true solutions that are effective and efficient and competitive in the marketplace to people that have a need, they're the ones that are on their way to being wealthy. That's one step. The second is that they have to have a desire to raise the standard of society. So they're wanting to raise the standard of themselves, not for their own pride and ego, that way, but for the ability to raise the standard so everybody has a place to rise. So they're investing in inspiration and serving and trying to raise the standards and surround themselves with the finest of everything they can. So they're honoring the people who are masters. If they honor the people who are masters and invest in the masters, the entire economic system rises, and they're contributing and they get rewarded by that. And the third thing is they have to transcend the morality of money. As long as they think it's good or bad or infatuated or resentful to it, it runs them. You have to get to a point where you realize it's just a measuring mechanism of services. It's a measure of services rendered. And if you value yourself, you value serving, and you transcend the morality of it, and you go and basically structure it economically where it's saved and invested, structure it with foresight, and go serve people, wealth is yours. There's nothing stopping you from it. But it won't happen unless you serve vast numbers of people. I ask people in almost every country, how many of you have used Microsoft Windows? And they all put their hands up.
Everybody in the room.
And I said, now you know why he's a billionaire. Because I asked 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million people, they'd have their hands up. Why? Because he found something all of you benefited by. And if you sat down and put your energy into thinking, how could I serve vast numbers of people, and came up with solutions.
And we're committed to that.
And we're committed to that. You're on your way to being very fortunate. But if you're thinking about yourself, and you're thinking about little small confines.
Or I'm broke, or I'm stuck, or what do I do?
You're focusing on
or,
exactly what's the problem is instead of the solution.
Beautiful. Now, another question is how to get out of a depression or a rut. And kind of we touched on it earlier, but say someone's in a funk right now. They're listening to this interview and they want to do something today, right now.
Well, you asked a very simple thing. What are you comparing your current reality to that you think it's supposed to be? And then what's the drawback if that was to occur? Because in that, if I ask somebody who's depressed, I go, okay, you're depressed about what? Well, because my business isn't doing well. Okay, good. If it was doing well, what would be the drawback? Oh, I'd be happy then. I said, what would be the drawback if it was doing well? Oh, I'd have, and they have to get them to get reality. Well, I have to hire new people, have to do more management and this. So you have a fantasy that it would be all positives without negatives, and therefore your current reality sees more negatives than positives. But if you ground that and you're prepared for the real responsibilities that come from the growth of the business, and you have a realistic objective, not a fantasy, you get grounded and you don't have to have the depression to wake you up to your fantasy.
And to take action on those steps.
Yeah.
You take it without the emotional burden of, oh shit.
Depression, I've not seen one depression that didn't have an expectation on other people to live in their values, an unrealistic expectation on other people to be one-sided, an expectation of the combination, an expectation on them to be one-sided, them to live outside their own values and somebody else's values, or the combination, or all the above, an expectation on the world in general to be one-sided, peace without war, kind without cruel, the expectation on the world supposed to live in their values, or the expectation on mechanical objects to live in their values. They get angry at cars or computers. I've had people literally slam computers down the ground, angry, called it stupid, because they don't know how to run it. So anytime you have an unrealistic expectation, delusion, or fantasy about life, depression is your friend to let you know that you got an unrealistic expectation. It's not your enemy, it's your friend. Just like fear is your friend for fantasies. So when you understand, if you go and look for what the fantasy is and dissolve the fantasy, the depression lifts on its own, and the chemistries change. I do it every single week, and I watch it week after week after week. People
I love that. And you've shared before that if you're attached to the fantasy, you're setting yourself up to live a nightmare.
Exactly.
I love that. Now, let me ask you a personal question. Obviously, you go around the world teaching this stuff. What's something that you struggle with or an insecurity that you have present day?
Well, the biggest struggle I have today is how do I get it all done? Because sometimes my schedule is pretty intense.
I totally understand.
And I really want to do it all.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody wants me to speak here, I'd love to do that. And sometimes there's no flights.
Yeah.
You have to do a private jet or you have to do something to get there.
Yeah.
So it's the intensity that I would love to fulfill. Sometimes it's challenging. And sometimes that makes it sleep challenging because of time zones and stuff like that.
Sure.
That's a challenge. I have a girlfriend who's now in South Africa. Most of the girlfriend, my wife passed away about 14, 15 years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
And she's up in the Universal Spa sending me Universal Express bills now. So what's happening is I've had 3 girlfriends since then. Star, who's an amazing lady, Lori, who's quite amazing. They've all done amazing things. And now Trish. But because I travel full time, my girlfriends like to see me more than probably I'm able to do it. And so that's a challenge sometimes. How do you juggle that? How do you get them to meet up with you and things of this nature? So logistical challenges are probably my biggest challenge. Learning is not a challenge. I love learning. Speaking is not a challenge. My main challenge is the logistics of managing all the things, and those are the processes that most of the biggest challenge. It's managing time for the kids, managing time for girlfriends, managing time for being able to speak all the places I want to go and accomplish the things I want to do. Because I have a 4,780 page goal book.
Wow.
So it's a big book, and so getting it all done is challenging.
Beautiful. And then the last thing I want to ask in relation to your field of study is, I saw one of your videos that mentioned about writing down 200 reasons to associate to your values, right? Like say you want to lift a value. I think it was a video about, say you want to make $100 million or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or get in phenomenal shape, or attract the person of your dreams as a significant other, or whatever the dream is for somebody listening. Can you explain a little bit about why it's important to actually tangibly write down your goals, why it's important to associate to those 200 reasons or whatever it is? Yeah.
If I gave you enough in the Breakthrough Experience program, which I do, my signature program, which I've done 1,070 something times, every weekend just about I do it, people come in with a perception, and a perception is nothing but a ratio of a stacked associations you have on things.
Good or bad, negative or positive, yeah.
Yeah, I got a story.
Again, yeah.
Can I do a story?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm in Sydney, Australia. I'm about to do the Breakthrough Experience. It's about 8 minutes to 8 in the morning. And I come in and put my goal book up in the front because I love reading it while they're working sometimes. And I was getting ready to go back to the back to put my microphone on. There's a girl in the front, and she is sitting there, and she's, "Oh, Dr. Demartini, I finally made it to the Breakthrough Experience. I'm so glad I've been here. I've been waiting for a while to get here. I've been saving my money, and I came." I said, "Fantastic." And she says, "I came here because I want you to help me find my soulmate." And I said, "Okay, that's not uncommon for a single woman." About 5 rows back, there was a guy who also snuck in, who was eating a breakfast snack, really grossly, like this.
Right.
And jokingly, I said to her, I said, "What about this guy?" And she turns around like this, and looks back and she goes, "Oh, Dr. Demartini, no, that's not exactly it." I said, "Really?" And she says, no, that's not my style." "Do you know who he is?" "No." "You don't know who he is? You don't recognize him?" "No." "He's one of the wealthiest billionaires in the world. We let him in early so he didn't have to sit there and people recognize him. And he's dressed the way he's dressed to make sure people don't really notice him. He's playing down.
Under the radar, yeah.
He's under the radar." She goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah. He hangs out with the A-list on the planet, all the presidents, the prime ministers, celebrities, living on his yachts, his jets, his homes around the world. I think he was married to Michelle Pfeiffer for a while, and she was frustrated because he was so humanitarian and was so dedicated to serving people around the world. He didn't have time for sometimes things that she wanted to do, and she was a little young and didn't appreciate that. She wishes she could have him back again. And he's done amazing things. He contributes things. You get to go out to dinner with royalty, and you meet amazing people and do amazing things. I mean, he's one of the most extraordinary people on the planet, but we wanted him to come in early.
Was this true?
Oh. So she goes, "Wow." And anyway, I'm going to the back, and she said, "Well, aren't you going to at least introduce me to him?"
Wow.
And then I told her, I said, "I'm just teasing you just to show you how vulnerable you are." So it was just making up a story.
Right.
But what I did is I stacked up associations with that man on all the things that the woman would probably want, and her brain changed its chemistry and was now looking past his ugliness and was seeing him as attractive now because of the ratios of perception. So our feelings are basic ratios of perception. Anaxagoras said this 2,600 years ago almost, and it's still true. So and when you know how to ask the right question, to become conscious of the benefits or drawbacks of things, you can change the ratios of perception and change your attractions and repulsions and not have things on the outside run you. You can run you. And so the mastery of knowing how to ask the question to make new associations in the brain is the mastery of life. Now, the reason I do 200 is because most people, when they're writing down the benefits to them, they already have some benefits, and they need to have enough to get past their conscious level of knowing and go into the unconscious and revamp neuroplastically and myelinate the brain in a new pathway. And so I know I get it if I do 200. It may be done in 60, but I know I get it at 200.
So the reason that you say 200 is so that people can write down, like say my goal is to lose 20 pounds or make 10 million bucks or whatever, that if you actually write down 200 reasons, it forces you to dig into your subconscious and have deep, really compelling reasons as to why to follow through.
If you just write down 200 benefits of why you want to be a millionaire or whatever, that's not going to do it. You got to write down the benefits of the proven action steps that if you do those action steps, you get that outcome.
Can you elaborate just a little bit more?
So if you say, I want to be a millionaire or a multimillionaire or something, okay, That's great. Sure, you want to be that. But if you don't stack the associations of the actual proven actions, that if you did these actions within the strategy, you'll get there, and you just say you want your outcome, but you don't have a strategy, you're not going to get there. So it's not just writing down the benefits of the fantasy of having that, because you'll just write down the benefits of spending all the money on it.
Yeah, no, the benefits of the action, not the benefits of the outcome.
The actions that have proven to get you there.
Not the benefits of the outcome.
Because if you don't have the benefits of the action, you won't do the actions that it takes to get there. So you have control over perceptions, decisions, and actions. So I got to change your perceptions of the actions to make a change in decisions and priorities.
So it all starts with perception.
It's all perception.
Beautiful. Now, the last question I have before we wrap up here and play a quick game is, when it comes to the law of attraction and manifestation and things of that nature, you've been in The Secret, obviously. A lot of people talk about the law of attraction and manifestation. Can you elaborate on exactly how that works in universal order as you see it?
Well, there's a number of variables on that. When you're living congruently and in alignment with what you value most, you have what is called a selective biased attention in your brain. And what to do is sensory information goes through the pulvinar nuclei in the brain and goes into the cortex. And that pulvinar nuclei is a gate and filtering mechanism based on what you value. So if you have a high value on something, if a mother has a high value on children, for instance, and she walks in a mall, she will spot children's clothes, children's items, etc. She won't spot business opportunities. She'll spot children's stuff. She'll filter her reality that way. And if a husband walks in the mall and who's an entrepreneur and walks in the same mall, he won't see clothes and children's stuff. He'll see business stuff. So we filter our reality with a selective biased attention and an attention surplus order, an elevated awareness of things that help us fulfill what we value most. So the secret is enhanced to the degree that you're congruent with what you say you want if it's aligned with what you value most. But if it's something low on your values, you won't see those opportunities. And then you'll think the secret's not working for you. So it's the key, the secret behind the secret left out of the secret was don't waste your time on goals that aren't truly yours. Don't waste your time on goals that aren't truly inspiring and really meaningful and really something that you're called to do. Focus on that. Find your telos. And all of a sudden, the synchronicities and the opportunities and the willingness to take action, because you have an attention and intention surplus order, because you tend to want to go and act on that. Because kids, when they do their video games and they love it, they just want to act. They don't need to be motivated. And you don't need motivation. So you see opportunities, you take advantage of opportunities, you make decisions quickly. As Napoleon Hill says, if you see opportunities, you make decisions quickly and you act on them, that's achievement. Well, that's what happens when you're setting goals that are aligned with your values. When you do, you have your innermost dominant thought. You keep thinking about it most. Because whatever's highest on your value is what you automatically think about most. You visualize most. Your executive center brings a vision to it. And you internally talk to yourself about most. So you spontaneously do the things that actually make the secret become real if you're congruent. So the number one secret is to make sure you're setting goals that are truly congruent with your highest values. That's why you fill your day with high priority actions, or it fills up with low priority distractions. And the people that don't do that, the secret doesn't seem to work for them. What's wrong with it? Why is it not working for me? Because they're living in fantasies about how their life's going to be instead of actually setting goals that are real for them in their value.
Wow, I love that. Okay, now as we wrap up the interview, we always play a game called First Things First. The way the game works is pretty simple. I'm just going to say a word or phrase, and then you just tell me the first word or phrase that comes to mind. Although I have a feeling that for you it will be phrases. So I'll sort of just say something, and then you tell me the first intuitive thing that comes to mind as it relates to advice to others on that topic. You with me? Okay. The only rule is that you can't repeat yourself twice.
Okay.
Okay. So first word, or first phrase, I should say, is how to develop your intuition so that you know it's true and you're not, how do you know when something is actually your intuition, or is that a fear, is that a worry? So how to develop your intuition and know what your truth is.
Well, instinct is trying to avoid pains. Impulses are trying to seek pleasures, and intuition is trying to neutralize them, so you don't see either. So anytime you can, whatever you're perceiving, if you ask the question, where is the opposite, you strengthen your intuition. Because what it's doing is it's trying to bring the unconscious conscious so you can be fully conscious. That's what intuition's for. And people confuse instinct, gut instinct, and intuition and feelings and all that stuff. They don't understand. Intuition is nothing more. When you're infatuated with something, your intuition is pointing the downsides. When you're resentful to something, your intuition is trying to point up the upsides. It's trying to neutralize polarizations to get you back into authenticity. And so intuition, the question to get intuition is to, whatever you're perceiving, where is its opposite? That trains your mind to see both sides of things.
Okay, beautiful. how to find peace when you're stressed instantly.
Well, inner peace is different than outer peace. If you're looking for outer peace, you'll be searching for eternity and not get anything but a fluctuating peace and war game. But inner peace is the realization that at the moment there's peace, where's the war? And at the moment there's war, where's the peace? Because maximum growth and development occurs at the border of support and challenge and peace and war. People have this fantasy they're supposed to have peace all the time. You don't grow there. Cultures don't grow under peace. They grow and they stagnate. They grow under challenge. So if you're looking for one side and you're looking for peace, look for the other side in that moment. If you see both sides at the same time, you have inner peace. When you can see that both the challenges in your life serve you as much as the calm in your life, you'll find inner peace. If not, you'll be searching for outer peace your whole life and not get it but half the time and end up bipolar.
Gratitude.
Gratitude is the second you see both sides of the same the event, whatever it is, you have gratitude. Gratitude is a perfectly equilibrated perception that opens the heart, and it's the key that opens up the gateway of the heart and allows love to come out, which window washes the mind, which makes you inspired and makes you enthused, makes you certain, and makes you present. So gratitude is the ability to see both sides simultaneously, synchronously of an event and not be swayed by an emotional misperception and bias.
Why most people are living unhappy, unfulfilled lives.
They're searching for a fantasy of trying to live in somebody else's values, or trying to get a one-sided aspect of life, or trying to get other people to live in their values, or trying to get them to be one-sided, or trying to get the world to be matching their values, or trying to get the world to be one-sided, or trying to get mechanical objects to be one-sided or live in their values. They're projecting their values onto other people and expecting others to live in their values, which is not going to happen.
The best daily ritual that you've ever incorporated in your entire life, from all the things you've tried, your best daily ritual that you would impart to others and share and encourage them to do. One discipline, if you had to pick one.
Yeah, very simple. I have the largest collection of gratitudes of anybody I've met on earth. and I keep that every single night. You'll be in there tonight. We'll be typing that in tonight, this interview. And because I've already written it, but I'm going to put it in there in more depth. But I go in there and I had the opportunity to meet this person, had the opportunity to do this today, had the opportunity to get this interview, had the opportunity to go and have a dialogue with this person. Whatever I had the opportunity to do that day, I documented every single day. And I have a very large collection of those, thousands of pages of those collections of gratitudes. They had the opportunity, that's what I call them.
What's your system? Is it 10 gratitudes a day, every single day?
It may not be 10, it may be 5, maybe 20.
You just let it flow, whatever feels right.
It depends, because sometimes I get in thank you letters during the day, and sometimes I get to meet amazing people. I mean, in the last month, the gratitudes have been quite enormous because I've had amazing opportunities come into my life and amazing people I've met in my life that are in tear-jerkingly inspiring experiences to have plenty to be grateful for. My mother told me when I was 4 years old and she was putting me to bed, son, make sure you count your blessings, because those that are grateful for what they have, they get more to be grateful for. And I've been doing that for many years now.
Every single day?
Yeah, every day. I don't miss a day. That's a daily ritual. I can show you upstairs on my computer and you can see it and you just go, whoa, you're serious.
So even if you're tired, is it at the end of the day, in the morning?
It could be in the morning or afternoon, but by the end of the day, I'm doing it again. I'm finishing it up.
How many would you say you have, give or take?
Well, put 4,780 pages on 10-point print, 1-inch margins. That'll tell you how many.
Holy cow. Top 3 books you've ever read aside from your own?
Syntopican Volumes 1 and 2 by Britannica, by Mortimer Adler are the 2 books I recommend every human being to read. Those are 2. They're about 800 pages each, and they're masterpieces. They're the greatest ideas from the greatest minds over the last 2,700 years.
Mm-hmm. The biggest breakthrough a human being could make to live their best life?
The courage to be themselves and honor themselves and not try to be somebody else. We live in a world that's trying to make us conform and try to fit in, and the courage to stand out and be an unborrowed visionary and allow themselves to go their own path, even though they may get ridiculed and violently opposed along the journey until their life becomes self-evident legacies.
At the end of Dr. John Demartini's life, what do you hope the legacy is that people remember you for?
But it's interesting you say that. Can I tell us another story or do I have time?
I would love to, as long as we have. I'm sure we've gone way over time, but yeah. I would absolutely love to hear it.
In 1999, right before the year 2000, Rome was preparing for its pilgrimage. It was attempting to do like Mecca for Islam. It didn't work out so well. Nobody came hardly, but they were preparing for it. And I was there doing the breakthrough experience in Rome. And after my breakthrough experience, the following morning, I was invited to go walk around Rome and go to some scenery and sights. And around the afternoon, because my flight wasn't until later that afternoon, early afternoon, I happened to come across a square that was roped off about the size of a soccer field. In the middle of the square was a marble and bronze statue of Giordano Bruno, the philosopher, theologian, and mystic and astronomer. The entire place was covered in red rose petals. And it was roped off. I mean, millions of red rose petals.
Wow.
And 400 years ago to the day, he would burn at the stake. And now 400 years later, they're honoring him as a genius 400 years ahead of his time. I had read about his life, and I knew something about him from my studies. And it was very inspiring to be there on that day where they honored him. But before he was killed and burned at the stake, because he was imprisoned, because the church said, what you're teaching is wrong. And he said, we live in an infinite universe with infinite worlds with infinite beings. We now know there's over 4,000 exoplanets discovered. So he was right. And the church at the time was still under a Ptolemaic and Aristotelian construct of a geocentric world, and it was limited, and they thought it was within the primal mobile, and they had a very limited astronomy. And his was beyond that. He unveiled the Flammarion diagram of infinite vision. And so they burned him at the stake. But before he died, he wrote a posthumous biography of how he wanted to be perceived 500 years in the future. And now, 400 years later, what he wrote became true. They were honoring him, and that's what he wrote. That someday the world will finally understand what I'm trying to say. I'm living in a world that can't see what I see. He was a visionary. So when I saw that, I was inspired by that. So when I left that night, and I got to the next place, I sat down and I got on a computer and did a Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise mission statement kind of writing thing.
Right.
And I wrote out about a 26-page, well, it was actually 23 pages, nonstop automatic writing about how I wanted to be perceived 1,000 years into the future. The impact I wanted to have 1,000 years.
Wow.
Because I remember the statement that we go around and say we have mortal souls, but none of us write immortal goals. And immortal goal is a goal beyond your life, on the impact you want to do. And Seneca, the poet and Roman philosopher and politician, said you don't measure a person by their immediate goals. You look at what they do over the centuries to come and what they're planning for that. And so Seneca impacted my life. And Heraclitus did that too. Heraclitus basically said that he wanted to immortalize himself, and he was looking at how do you immortalize yourself and leave an impact way beyond your life to build momentum. So anyway, I filled my mind with these minds, and I wrote this thing out. And that was 2000, right at 1999 to 2000. In 2009, I was asked to speak at the Melk Abbey over the Danube River at the Walsell Conference, where they had 200 people from around the world, media from all over the world, and it was 200 leaders around the world, and there was 12 speakers, the Dalai Lama, Muhammad Yunus, Wolf Singer, myself, a bunch of people. And we got to do a presentation on trying to solve 6 world problems. And at the end of the Saturday night, they gathered in the library at the Melk Abbey, all the speakers in a semicircle. And all the people attended got to be a watch around it. And they honored each person by handing them a stainless steel cylinder. And I didn't know they had done this, but they'd taken 365 quotes from my books.
Wow.
And they had taken the DeMartini method, which is what I was introducing there on conflict resolution, and they had calligraphied it on beautiful scroll paper, rolled it up, put a ribbon around it, stuck it in the stainless cylinder, vacuum sealed it, and handed it to us to walk down the library to the very end of the library into the Infinity of Divinity library room, which has this 12-foot Infinity of Divinity library shelf. And I got to stick it in the center of that shelf to be sealed for 1,000 years.
Wow. What did that feel like?
It was a tear-jerking moment because I realized that what I wrote in that 1,000-year plan just had the reality manifest. Because I know that now when they open that up 1,000 years from now, I'll have that information there.
What would the young surfer, hippie, I don't know if you were, smoking weed or anything, but what would the young, hippie, free-thinking version of you who was surfing, hitchhiking, what would the John DeMartini today tell that young man who was looking for answers?
Thank you. You're right on track. You haven't made a mistake.
Beautiful.
Because there's nothing back. Anything you look back and you can't say thank you for is baggage. Anything you look back and you say thank you for is fuel. I wouldn't change a thing. I've had an adventurous life, And I mean, amazing life. And so I wouldn't change a thing.
Word number 9 is money. The way money works, the way money flows.
Meaning what? What's
Yeah, so remember the 10 words or phrases?
Yeah.
So money, just in terms of money, how it works, how it flows, how it operates.
Well, the beauty of money is it allows us to have sustainable, fair exchange and gives us the opportunity to care about another human being in a way that we can serve them and be served in return in a fair exchange. Sustainable, fair exchange, that's what it represents.
I love that. And I love what you said about if you're broke, it's because you don't care about humanity.
Yeah, because when I was 9 years old, my dad said, "Go, you want to make some money? Go out and serve people."
Period, yeah.
And I don't. There's nothing stopping me from serving people. So there's nothing stopping me from earning money.
Beautiful. Now the last one I have before I wrap up here is, as we know, decisions shape our destiny. So when it comes to making decisions at any point in life, we have to make them daily. So what would Dr. John Demartini's best advice be to people who listen to this interview, and now as we wrap up here, who are faced with decisions? Obviously there's, sometimes people are faced with like, I should do this, or I should do this. There's reasons stacked up on both sides. What's your best advice for how to make effective decisions that lead you to your ultimate destiny of fulfillment?
To not make a decision, but to go actually and balance out the perceptions of both sides until they're perfectly balanced. And the moment you do, you'll have gratitude. It'll open up your heart. Your heart will inspire you, and you'll make an action out of love instead of a decision out of ignorance.
Now, my last question is, what do you hope people take away from this interview and effective immediately go take action on?
I want them to realize that they have something amazing inside themselves and give themselves permission to do something extraordinary on the planet. The magnificence of who they are is far greater than any fantasies they'll impose on themselves. And don't subordinate to the world on the outside. Allow the voice and the vision on the inside to rule and govern the amazing things you can do on the outside. And realize that if you communicate what you would love in terms of what other people love, the world will help you get exactly what you love.
I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Martini, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for enjoying this video. And if you found this content valuable, uplifting, and inspiring to take your life and your business to the next level, then I have some exciting news for you. Because the Passionate Few Academy officially launched our brand new on-demand training that you can access absolutely free at www.tpfacademy.com. Right there, you'll learn the #1 way to grow your personal brand or business brand online fast. The same way I've learned from interviewing some of the most successful people on the planet right here on the show who've done exactly that. So again, don't forget to check it out, www.tpfacademy.com. I promise you'll be blown away. And also, don't forget, there's 3 ways you can connect with me further. #1, you can text me absolutely free at the number on the screen right now and send me your most pressing life, business, or branding question, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. #2, if you'd like to be interviewed on the show, you can actually apply right now in the description below and apply to share your incredible story, brand, or business right here with an audience of potentially millions of people, the same way we've helped experts, entrepreneurs, and authors just like you. And don't forget, that opportunity comes with the ability to partner with us and help feed 1 million people through our partnership with Feeding America. Again, you can click the link in the description below titled Interview Application to find out more. And last but not least, #3, if you'd like to get consulting from our team and work with you to help you grow your personal brand or business brand, no matter what industry you're in, we can do that by simply filling out the questionnaire in the description below titled Consulting Application. And if our team thinks that you'd be a great fit, who knows, you may just be invited to work with us to help you take your business to the next level. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for enjoying this video. Make sure to smash that subscribe button, turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. And until next time, live strong, live with passion, and I'll see you in the next inspiring video.